Good morning, and welcome to this week's VC Notes. This is our Coffee Talk edition, and I am thrilled to tell you that we have a very special guest this week, the governor of our state, Governor Tate Reeves. Thank you so much for being with us today, Governor. We're thrilled to have you here and just delighted to have a chance to visit with you.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation. I'm looking forward to it.
So our tagline here that we use for social media and a variety of other things is a healthier Mississippi. When we say that, we pretty much are always thinking about traditional health, physical health, mental health, healthcare delivery. But in reality, we know that the health of a person, the health of a community, the health of a state is really tightly connected to not just physical health in the traditional way we think about it, but also economic health of a person, of a community, of a state, the educational attainment level. So as we typically talk about health, I just want to say to you and express my appreciation for all the work that you have done and the leadership that you have provided, not only in healthcare, but also in things related to economic development, to bringing in industries and entities like Amazon, et cetera, and working toward increasing and improving that educational, those educational outcomes for the state of Mississippi, because it really is all tied together. You've done a lot of work for hospitals and health systems related to the MHAP program and different things like that, but all of it really comes together to affect what we think of as health. So I thank you for that. Myself and on behalf of the organization and the support that you've provided. I'm hoping though today, we may get to some of those topics as we go along, but what I'm really hoping today is to, at least as we kick off, to have a few minutes just to hear a little bit about you. Those typical Mississippi questions. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? Tell us about your family. I shared earlier with you that this is an audience of somewhere around 11 to 15,000 people, and they may not have heard before, some of those things about you. When did you decide you were interested in politics? So we'd love to hear a little bit about you and yourself, where you grew up, and how you kind of progressed to where you are now.
So I have spent the vast majority of my life in central Mississippi. I grew up in Florence, went to Florence High School, played basketball there, and then got the opportunity to play basketball at Millsaps. And so I decided to spend my 4 years in college here in central Mississippi as well, lived here in the city during that time, and then I married Ely not long after that. She also went to Millsaps, and we lived here in the city all the way up until 2005, and then of course moved back to Jackson over in 2020. And so, I always, when I talk about my background, I try to start a generation before. My mom and dad are both graduates of Bogachita High School down in Lincoln County. My dad was one of 11. He had 5 brothers and 5 sisters. I love to tell the story because he was one of the first in his family to go to any college. He went to Colin Community College on a half football scholarship and a half basketball scholarship. And so I used to ask him all the time, so what does that mean you went half for football, half for basketball? He said, Tate, honestly, that meant I wasn't very good in either one of them. and
just trying to make it work.
But he got the opportunity. He went to JUCO. He did well there. And then he moved from Wesson up to central Mississippi. My mom spent a career in the healthcare space, and he put himself through Mississippi College and then started his own business in the 70s and still running that small business today. And so a lot of the values that I got came from them, and as is true with all of us and our family, and whether we were raised by our parents or grandparents or otherwise, the foundational upbringing that I got, we didn't start off rich by any stretch of the imagination, but I was fortunate to have 2 parents who love their kids. And a lot of society's ills can certainly be solved by more of that, not less of that. And so I've been so very blessed and in my life, and I was working here in town, and Had a couple of opportunities to move to other larger cities throughout the Southeast and even on the East Coast. But I wanted to, at the end of the day, I wanted to raise my family here as well. And because of those values that we learn in small towns all across Mississippi, just like my parents did in Bogachita. So, it's been an interesting life and a fun one. And in this particular job, there's no shortage of challenges. We all know that. No,
That's right.
Or as I like to say,
right.
no shortage of opportunities.
That's right. That's right. That's right. So at Millsaps, you got your college education and also found your wife, and I think those were both two very positive things.
No doubt.
And so the two of you have several daughters.
We do.
Maybe you tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So I have Ely and I have 3 daughters, which is just
You're outnumbered. You are outnumbered
by a lot, plus 2 female dogs, just so as to add insult to injury, And so, but my oldest is a sophomore at Mississippi State, and my middle daughter is a senior, and my youngest is in the 7th grade. And I tell everybody all the time, I really only do 2 things in life right now. At this phase of my life, I do 2 things. I work, and I watch my kids play sports. Yeah. But not necessarily in that order. And so we've been blessed for them to get great educations and learn what it's like to be part of a team and compete, and because everything in life seems to be a competition, and I think those lessons learned and by youth growing up, learning how to win at sports, but also learning how to lose, because none of us are successful in everything that we do, and none of us have are fortunate enough to win at every game we play or win at everything we try to do in life. There are pluses and minuses. There are always disappointments, and you got to learn how to deal with those. And really, character is really defined oftentimes by how you react to the tough times. But yeah, we've got 3 daughters. They've all done well, and we're excited to continue to watch them progress. So.
Well, those wonderful days watching your children play sports and being involved in those activities, those are precious moments. So I'm glad that y'all are involved in that. It seems like it goes by way too fast, but they are wonderful and precious moments. Yeah, yeah. So like you, I'm a lifelong Mississippian, and I think that it is important when people make decisions to stay in the state and try to invest talents in the state and to keep folks here. There are opportunities that are outside of the state, but I think it is important when people say, I'm going to stay here and try to make this place better. When was it along the way? Was it in college or after college when you thought, politics? That might be interesting.
Well, it's kind of a fascinating question, because I really never dreamt of being in politics. No one in my family has really been involved. I mean, obviously, family members involved in their local level, knowing their supervisor or knowing their countywide elected officials, but no one has really served in any real large public office. And I don't know that there was any real strong desire. I'd always been interested in politics. I was a member of the organization in college and volunteered on the campaigns and enjoyed doing a little bit of political work, working on campaigns of certain candidates. But then I began my career in the world of finance, and I managed money for a living. My background is I got an economics degree from Millsaps. I really wanted to focus in finance, and I went to work with a couple of local financial institutions, and that's what I did for the first 8 or 9 years of my career. And then 2003 came along, and Mississippi was in a really difficult financial position at that time. Our total operating budget at the state level then was $3.6 billion, and Mississippi had basically a $720 million shortfall. So our legislature at the time had, I would argue, overspent by about 25%. Well, even for governments, that's pretty bad.
And even so, for somebody not in finance, I can tell you
exactly.
That's not
it's
good.
a pretty big, mess that you find yourself in. And so I decided, looking at that, and that we really needed someone in state government that understood economics and finance. And so I decided to run for state treasurer. I'd never run for anything before, I didn't even run for student council at my local high school, right? And so it was not something that I thought would happen, but I felt called to do it. I was fortunate enough that Ely and I, and she jokes about this now, wasn't much of a joke for many years, but we got married in November, and then 15 months later I qualified to run for statewide office. So good and bad. The good news is we didn't have any kids at that time, and so we were able to go from basically both working full-time from a two-income family to she quit her job. I took a leave of absence. We traveled all over Mississippi in that very first campaign. I don't think there was anybody, maybe including the two of us, that actually thought we could win. And by the way, they were all right and justified in their views. There were 7 people in the race, and we were fortunate enough to end up and be successful. And what I would tell you is probably my love of public policy and what became a love of the political environment was really driven in that year after I qualified to run. It doesn't really make sense, but I qualified to run, and then I started traveling around and meeting with people and hearing their stories, and I just got fired up about making Mississippi better. And I got fired up to make Mississippi better because of the stories I heard from the people like my mom and dad in Boca Chica, who just happened to get an opportunity to better themselves through education, and my life was much better growing up than their lives were. And so, but you hear that, I mean, that story, I tell it a lot, but the reason I tell it is because that story is Mississippi's story.
That's right.
And I think we can all point to either ourselves or someone in our life that we know that someone just decided, hey, I'm going to try to make things a little bit better for this individual. And it just, a lot of good things happen after that. And so obviously I served 2 terms as state treasurer, then had the opportunity to serve 2 terms as lieutenant governor and really focus on the policy side of things in our state, as that's obviously a very influential position in Mississippi. And then it's hard to believe, but heading towards the end of the 5th year of being governor, and we came in at a challenging time, and I'm actually having a lot of fun being governor now.
Good.
As you well know, 2020 and 2021 left a lot to be desired for a lot of people who are watching this today, and left a lot to be desired for a lot of people across America and across the world. But you're put in a position of decision making for a reason, I think, and so it's been an interesting run, but it literally feels like those 21 years have gone by just like that. It's amazing, really.
It is astonishing how quickly it can go by. I am grateful that 2020 and 2021's in the rearview mirror, and now we're kind of looking out into the future in a different way. So in these next few years, what are some of the things that you've kind of got on the horizon? Just sort of at the big picture level as you're thinking about these the runway right here in front of you. What are the things you're excited about and you're thinking about?
And you mentioned it a little bit in your opening. I have a fundamental belief. I mean, obviously, we in Mississippi, like every other state, we have fundamental challenges that haven't just born themselves to us. They're challenges that we're dealing with that are literally multi-generational, and some of them are because of bad decisions that have been made in the past by others, and some of them are bad decisions that we make in the present by ourselves. It's just reality. But I do believe that at its core, there aren't a lot of the challenges that we face that couldn't be solved by individuals having better education and high-paying jobs. That tends to help solve a lot of the individual societal ills that we deal with. And because of that, it is my view that the governor's number one responsibility is being the state's chief economic development officer and bringing better and higher-paying jobs to our state, while at the same time recognizing that we have to improve our educational attainment level so as more of our people have either the college degree that they need or the skills that they need to fill those jobs that are paying higher wages today. And so to me, everything, if I could script my day every day, I would spend 99% of my time focused on those things. And what I will tell you is I think we've made tremendous progress in so many ways in each of those areas. But we will be working until the end of time to continue to improve those if our governors are focused on what they ought to be focused on, in my view. And so that's one of the things that I am doing more and more of now. I think we're having more and more success now when you think about the fact that prior to October of 2022, Mississippi's never announced a project larger than $1.2 billion in new capital investment. Well, over a 15-month period from October 2022 to January 2024, we announced not one, not two, but 3 projects larger than $2 billion in total capital investment. And the jobs that are created and associated with those jobs are not only large capital investments, but they're also really good paying jobs, and jobs that pay far greater than the state average, and in many instances pay far greater than the national average. And so I tell folks all the time, and I actually said it in my very first inaugural address, and a lot of my staff members are like, don't say this because they'll hold you to it, but it's true and I believe it. And I said, look, if you only judge me by one economic statistic when I finish my 8 years as governor, just look at per capita income. And per capita incomes are up 30% in the last 4.5 years in Mississippi, the largest movement we've ever seen in the history of our state. Now, unfortunately, costs have gone up as well, and people are still not doing as well as we want them to be, considering the fact that we've had a huge run in per capita incomes. But again, that is the driver of so many of our challenges. And if we can continue to drive those per capita incomes up through not only new jobs and better paying jobs coming into the state, but also training our workforce and training our people and investing in our people, then I think the combination of those things will bear out to be very favorable for the state.
Leads to success. I think, we know that success builds upon success. And certainly from the healthcare side of things, we know that when people don't have jobs and they don't have that education level, that it impacts their health and it impacts the health of their children and their families. And then when they're not healthy, it is hard for them to be in school and to get the training and the skills and the education to have that good job. All these, it's like a triangle, and all these pieces are so connected with each other. And many of these efforts, I think that it will infrastructure that's being put into place now and successes that we are seeing now, the real benefit will show up in another 10, 15, 20 years from now. Sometimes people will ask me about my own job, how do you know if you're doing a good job? And, there are a lot of days when it's kind of like, well, I don't. I don't. And the sad thing is, I don't think we'll really know for the, another 10, 20 years when we look at health outcomes in the state. But all of these things are additive together, and any efforts that are in isolation, I think, are less likely to be successful than when these, efforts are kind of working together and pulling together. So I think that's, it's encouraging.
Well,
it's encouraging
and look,
news.
And here's what, and I tell my team this all the time, but when you talk about, you will really be able to tell the mark that you made, not tomorrow or the next day, but 10 and 15 and 20 years from now. That is so difficult for politicians to understand. I mean, it's so difficult because, politicians tend to define the long term by whenever the next election day is.
That's right. They need to get elected
When is the next election day? And so that's what they focus on. And I tell my team all the time, and, we have to deal with the problems of today. But we're not going to focus on them. We're not going to allow that to keep us from understanding what our long-term goal is. And my view has always been, and now I'm at the end of the political road, right? I don't get to run for re-election, and so
I want to ask you what's next, but I'm not going to ask that.
well, you can ask it, but when I think about it, for me, I've tried to make decisions, a lot of which are admittedly not always popular, but I've tried to make decisions not based upon what I think is best for the next election, but what I think is best for the next generation. And what are we doing to lay that foundation to make the things better for the next generation? And for me, I've tried to never allow myself to be defined by whatever position I have, whatever title I have, because I don't really care about all that. The only title that matters to me is dad. I mean, period. I mean, it really is. And because I do think I have fundamental responsibilities with my children that are what I have to focus on. But that has allowed me, I think, to make a lot of decisions over many years, some of which at the time were popular, some of which at the time were very unpopular. But I really believe that they were the right thing to do. And I tell people, like, for me, I've got a lot of critics out there, and I get that. I understand it, and I've made decisions that I look back on and think, you know, if I knew differently then, maybe I would have done something differently. But I will tell you, the greatest critic I have is the person that looks back at me in the mirror every day, period. And so if I can get up in the morning and know that the day before I made the best decision I could make given the facts that I had at that time.
That's right.
Then I have no problem making another hard decision the next day. And if that meant I was going to lose an election a year later or 5 years later, then it is what it is. You know, you figure it out after that. So, but I do think, particularly with some of the hard things we've done around education, the results that we're seeing today are because of many hard decisions that were made in 2012 and 2013 by a lot of well-intentioned people, some of whom thought things would work out, some of whom were like, I don't know about this, but I think having the willingness to make hard decisions is why we're seeing the kind of improvements that we're seeing at the educational and the economic level in the state.
And you know, that is part of leadership. Sometimes leadership is kind of a lonely place. You do have to make decisions that are not necessarily popular, but hindsight's always perfect vision. But you don't have all that when you're making decisions in the moment, and to be able to make the decisions with the best information that you have, that you truly believe are the best, and to move forward. I think that's all you can do. Sometimes we get it right, sometimes we get it wrong, and that's part of life. But being able to adapt and to keep moving and whatnot, I think is just kind of that's all you can do. You know, that's just that you do the best you can, and that's what you can do. So a couple of times you've mentioned your kids and ball games and being a dad and what have you, and so I think I know the answer to this before I ask it, but I'm curious. Hobbies. What about hobbies? if you're not being the governor, which I know really you never turn that off. That's a 24/7 kind of job. And if you're not at the games watching your kids, what are the things that you like to do for fun? Let's just pretend like you had some spare time.
Well, if I had plenty of spare time, I love to hunt. I love to fish. You know, I did very little offshore fishing growing up. Just wasn't. My dad was working a lot as well, and I just never did much of it. But I love to do it now. I don't get a lot of time to do it, but I really enjoy it when I do. I grew up hunting and fishing. I love sports. I love athletics. I enjoy going to sporting events. I've been to most every major sporting event in America, and have loved every one of them. And because it's something that I enjoy. I love college athletics. I go to a lot of the state and Ole Miss and Southern football games. Sometimes they feel like work, as you probably know, as in your position. But I enjoy doing that, and I'm hopeful once my kids get done playing sports, and once I get done with the next 3.5 years, I'm going to have even more time to do a lot of those things.
So as you're kind of looking out to the future, What are your thoughts about beyond your term as governor? And, I know we don't know what the future holds, but anything that you're willing to share.
Well, I'll be honest, I don't have a lot of time to think about what happens 3.5 years from now. I have watched my whole life, and I have noticed that being governor is hard, and it's easy when you get in year 6 and year 7 and year 8 that the people that work for you are looking for what is their career, and you end up seeing a lot of movement, and you see a lot of agency heads move, and the deputy directors of these agencies move, trying to protect themselves against the future.
Right.
And I understand all of that, but that kind of turnover leads to turmoil, which leads to bad decisions being made. And so I am extremely focused, and I met with my senior leadership team just in the last month or so and said, look, let's communicate all the way through, because I want to sprint through the finish line. I want to sprint through the finish line when it comes to economic development, but I want to make sure we don't make bad decisions, not because we intentionally did so, just because something fell through the cracks. And all the different agencies that report to the governor, there's a lot of opportunity for that. And so we're really focused on that. When I think about myself, look, I spent my first 8 or 9 years of my career in the private sector. I'm perfectly content going back into the private sector and trying to figure out exactly what that looks like. I've been encouraged to consider other options, and we'll see what comes up. But I would venture to guess that once my term is over as governor, that I would go back into the private sector, or as Ely likes to say, it's time for you to get a real job. Time for you to get a real job. So
there's somebody like Ely's always there in the picture, keeping it real. Keeping it real. Time to get to work. So as we're wrapping up here, just one last thing that I want to ask you, and this is pretty open-ended, so you can whatever's on your mind. Somewhere in the 11 to 15,000 folks have the opportunity to see this, and it has been more focused kind of on you more as a person rather than really the office of the governor and any kind of specific policy or anything. But is there anything that we have not touched on that you specifically would like to share a certain message with this audience? It's healthcare professionals, it's nursing, physicians, staff, students of healthcare schools, all types of schools. So that's kind of the audience that would hear this. And just as an open slate, is there anything that you would want to say to them that we have not touched on?
Well, thank you, and thanks for having me on today. And it's been a great conversation. I want to begin by just thanking you. Thank you for what you do every day, leading this organization that plays a critical role in Mississippi. But also, thank all of your employees. Everybody that's watching this today plays a critical role in helping Mississippi get better. And I think more than anything else, one of the things that I think a lot about is, there are a lot of folks outside our state that underestimate us. But the reality is sometimes we underestimate ourselves. And so what I want everyone to understand is I really do believe that, and you said it earlier, success begets success. And we're having unprecedented and unparalleled success in our state, whether it's educational attainment levels, where you think about the fact that it was only 10 years ago when only 72% of our high school kids were graduating high school.
Wow.
Last year it was 90%. That means we have close to 4,000 kids every year. They're getting a high school diploma that would not have 10 years ago. Our fourth grade reading and fourth grade math results are up. Our economic development successes with over $20 billion in new projects announced just in the last 4.5 years. And oh, by the way, they're happening all over the state. And when I think about where we find ourselves today, I do think it's incredibly important that we continue to work together to make our capital city better, to make this area better, because when we think about some of the challenges that we face in keeping our best and our brightest here, we need a thriving capital city. And We have a lot of thriving areas throughout the state. We have a lot of suburbs that are doing very well around here. But I want to continue to work, whether it's the next 3.5 years or beyond, to make sure that we continue to build on these successes. I really believe that what I was taught growing up was that giving a fair and level playing field, we can compete with anybody anywhere in the world. And I want to keep knocking down roadblocks, knocking down speed bumps to ensure that we have that fair and level playing field, because I think if we do, we'll see unprecedented economic prosperity. And once we continue to see unprecedented educational attainment levels and unprecedented economic prosperity, we can then begin to see even more improvements in a lot of the things that challenge us from all over the state, many of which have been true for the last 100 years, but let's try not to allow them to be true for the next 100 years.
No, thank you for that, and thank you again for being on with us today. I feel excited and inspired by the things you have shared. This is, I think the future is bright, and I'm excited about the things that are kind of on deck that you're working to accomplish and the leadership you're providing for the state. So thank you for that. Thank you for your support of the Medical Center. We very much appreciate it. And in closing, I just want to echo what our governor said. Thank you to all of you that are doing the hard work here at the Medical Center every day and doing your part in all of our efforts leading toward a healthier Mississippi. Thank you.